Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMordie, and I'm still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Pascal Langdale. Oh my goodness. I know I start a lot of my episodes with a big, oh my goodness, because I'm just so excited for the episode you're about to hear, but I am so excited for the episode you're about to hear. So, Pascal has an incredible story to tell. He started his life basically as a ballet dancer, went to RADA, studied the greats, studied musical theater, mega theater actor, and then when he moved to Toronto, really got into embodied movement. He's a Mocap artist, voiceover artist. He's been in a ton of video games. But what we really dive into in this episode, besides, of course, how to be a Mocap actor and a video game actor that a lot of people want to know about, but we dive into the embodiment of character. And he talks about, his process, right? First thing he does is he memorizes all the lines, through and through. We all know how to do that. And then he, basically, as morbid as this sounds, crawls into the flesh of the character and he goes into how he does that. He becomes embodied, the physicality of a character and finding truth in that. Oh, I am a science nerd. Y'all know this. So is Pascal. We go into the biopsychosocial aspect of intent, physicality. Oh my gosh, everything. It makes my brain tingle just thinking about what you're going to hear. Again, like I said, we also go into acting for video games and how to get into a career in Mocap, but the meat and potatoes of this episode is all about his approach to acting, his approach to embodied movement. I absolutely adore this human being. He has helped me so much with my theater acting career, with my Mocap auditions, with my voiceover auditions. He's an incredible, incredible teacher and actor. Please enjoy Pascal Langdale. Tell me your story. How did you get into this crazy business?
Well, I was I was listening to who was I listening to? Antonio Salvatore. So I was listening to him.
Salvatore, yeah.
Yeah, and he kept on saying, "Well, it's what I always wanted to do," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm probably going to say roughly the same thing." No, so okay. It all started when I was about 4 years old, and my mum came to me and she said, you know that teacher who teaches your brother's gymnastics? Well, she also teaches ballet. Would you like to do that? And I had no idea what it was. But I saw the joy on her face. And as a dutiful 4 or 5 year old, I went, yes. And then it turned out that, I'd go to these classes. It turned out I was pretty good. We kept it a secret from the rest of the school because of the times we were living in, So I learned that you had to hide, which is interesting. That's not a good psychological lesson to teach anybody, but there you go. That's the era I come from. So I was good at it. I ended up auditioning for the Royal Ballet School, which is where, if you've ever seen the film Billy Elliot, which is also dated too, that's where he goes. And I had to audition against about 12,500 other boys, and you're one of 10, right? So it's competitive. And you have to re-audition each year to get back in. So, again, brutal. I was watching Whiplash last night and I was explaining, yep, I know this world. So it's very, very competitive. It's an awful place. And I was lucky enough to be thrown out after 2 years. And I do see that as a stroke of luck. It was obviously a bit traumatic, but I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go to Elmhurst Ballet School, which taught everything. And obviously I've been a bit burnt by ballet, so I got into all kinds of different dance, and I really enjoyed flamenco, and I really enjoyed tap dancing and musical theatre. And then I discovered that the bits I really liked about musical theatre were the acting bits. So when I was about 16, 17, I started being curious. And so I went off to London, the big town of London, and went to a theatre. I a 16, 17-year-old going down Shaftesbury Avenue, probably looking like a dancer as well, dressed with one of those slingshot wallets and, a hat or something, I don't know. Pretentious as hell. Anyways, I've got some stories from that era, boy. Anyway, so I go to this, I watched Judi Dench in a rather awful play. It's not very well written. I realize that now. I don't think I knew her then, but, and at the end of the play, she stands at the front of the stage and she does a speech about how her writer husband, this is going to show what kind of play it was. Her writer husband, who was a sort of a traumatized writer, manically depressed, bipolar possibly, who knows. But he asks her to, as a way of reconnecting with her, to join him in the shower, where she would wash him with soap, and he gives her the soap. But what she doesn't realize is that there's a razor blade in the soap. So as she's scrubbing him down, she's flaying him. She realizes, she gets out, and then the guy jumps off of their cliff top, what writers apparently can afford, house. And that's the story. I mean, when you tell that, it's like, what an awful story, and it's melodramatic, and what the hell, right? But she did it the way she did it, and this is the thing that just blew my mind, was that she took me on, and I was so involved with how she was feeling, how her husband was feeling, how that I was in there. And I noticed that everybody else on the balcony was leaning forward, and it was all I could do to stop myself from shouting out, "No!" Because that's what she was doing. And afterwards I thought, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to make people feel things that they maybe don't feel or can't feel in their everyday life, to the point that they want to stand up and shout no. So involved and so invested. And I saw another play with Roger Allen, who's a Shakespearean actor, playing much ado about, no, what was it? Kiss Me Kate. I'm thinking of the musical version. Take Me to the Shrew. And he was so charming, and I understood it as well. And I'd never understood Shakespeare before. And again, so I went back to my ballet school, theatre school, and I said, I want to audition for drama school. And they said, okay, well, if you do that, we'll take your scholarship away. Because the scholarship was designed for somebody to graduate and be celebrated as a scholarship student, right? Which I now kind of understand. But at the time, this played to my, should we say, fuck you attitude, which can be useful at times, but destructive at others. And I said, okay, then fine. I won't go back. So I didn't graduate. I actually didn't graduate high school as a result. So I left school at the age of 17. And I got into this drama school called Webber Douglas, which I couldn't afford. I tried to raise money for it. I couldn't do it. And I didn't get in anywhere else. So I'd taken this gamble, and it kind of lost. And I thought, well, okay, I'll just start getting work as a dancer. So I tried. I was so shy. I would turn up at these dance studios and not talk to anyone, just go do the dance class and then disappear again, just wanting to be able to talk to somebody. Oh yeah, God, I was so shy. But then I got a pantomime. Then I got after that, at the same place, I got 7 by 7 Brothers. Then I got a offer of a part in Cats as well. And I got a TV job as well, as an actor, which was amazing. Strawberry Tree, where I'm credited differently. But again, that's another story. There are too many. And, and so I left, and I hoofed it around as a commercial dancer for about 1.5 to 2 years, and then I auditioned only for RADA. Now, I had an instinctive hatred of anything with the word royal in it, but this was the school that I felt, this is the place I want to go. And I got so close in the first rounds. I was down to, like, the first time I auditioned, I got to like the 3rd round, but they didn't accept me. So I was too young. So I just tried again a year later. And the guy who was the principal then, I think in our year, he just basically said, I'm going to select a bunch of people that I believe are going to be great artists or creators in the industry, not necessarily famous, like, film stars. And so we're all still in touch with each other, where the other years are not so much, which is quite extraordinary. And we have a real diversity in our year that was not replicated in years afterwards. So I was really lucky, I think. Really lucky to be in that year at that time, except that it was the last year where it was a diploma course, so I didn't get a degree. So I haven't graduated, I don't have a degree, and I'm sitting here.
Okay, so you fake graduate, whatever they call it, leave RADA, finish.
With a 3-year diploma.
Yeah. What happens next? What brought you to Canada?
No, not at all. So at the time, this is 96, there was still quite a lot of theatre around. There was commercials that were, because we were part of Europe, lots of commercials were cast in London because we had a larger acting pool, and they had less actors in some of the small European countries. So often they would cast UK actors, and you would either be dubbed or they would be non-verbal. And so the first jobs I got were theatre. I went to the Glasgow Citizens Theatre for a year, basically. Long Day's Journey into Night, Dracula. There's 2 or 3 plays, maybe more. I can't remember now. I met a fantastic actor called Lawrence Ruddick, who now is in Egypt, oddly enough, in Cairo. And I had this feeling that here I was, I'm going to step out and I'm going to find my people, and I'm going to be surrounded by like-minded people that treat acting as like a secular religion, and everybody's going to be really no, not at all. And it was so disappointing. It was really weird, because I'd had this impression, this thought, this belief that if I went through this system, that, okay, rather you had you had this half decent collegiate attitude, but you were all quite different. But out in the profession would be an extension of that, where you would have even more people, and so you would find your tribe. And I didn't, and I can remember being really quite crushed about that. And so then I sort of became somewhat hard-nosed, I would say. So, right, okay, well, I've just got to earn money, have fun while I'm doing it. The ideal of acting, if you like, the spirit of what I'd caught from Judi Dench was sort of put on a lower rung, and so, and I started doing film and TV, and I got a better agent from a series that I got working with Gerard Murphy, oddly enough. There's a story about that too. But anyway, so I sort of slowly went up the ladder, for want of a better word. And this is a tricky word. I know that one of your podcast guests were talking about the ladder. You've always got to stay on the ladder. So that sort of impression that I was going up the ladder. And then I got a video game called Heavy Rain that took me to France. That was 2008. I did about maybe 30 or 40 commercials across that time, which helped me, be financially secure. And this is something I'd advise many actors, actually, is to look after your finances, to enable you to be an actor. I got this game. And at this time, I was getting to the point where I was thinking, well, I'm doing work. I'm always being cast as European or French, or I'm not being seen for British parts. And I'm kind of known for being a commercial actor. And yes, I've done this game, but at that time, it was no big deal doing a game. I can remember David Cage saying, "You are going to be so famous. You'll be able to go to LA." And it was like, the game went down. It was like, beep, because it was like completely unknown back then. It was not the way that it is now. And I just got fed up. I was like, well, I also at that point was married, and with a first child as well. And across this period, I was like, well, my now ex-wife, she was American. She didn't want to stay in the UK. I faced having to move out of London if I wanted to grow my family, buy a house that I would never own, and then do work I didn't like to pay for it, which didn't make any sense at all. And so my mum really loved Toronto and loved Canada, and I sort of, we tried the US, we tried LA and New York, and it's like, well, just swapping one problem for another, basically. So we decided on Toronto, being halfway between each of our families, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. And that's why I moved, really. And so when I arrived, I had no idea, and I had to kind of prove myself all over again, oddly enough, which is what you have to do in Toronto. And so that took, again, a little bit of time. And again, I felt I was getting back on the ladder. But the secret is there is no ladder, really. There's no ladder. It's not like Stratford, possibly. You stay there for long enough and you'll go up the ladder. But the reality for most of acting is that it's a continual process. That's all it is. And if you think that you're going to be rewarded for your hard, the investment, the hard work now is going to have a commensurate reward in 5-6 years' time, maybe not. And so that requires a very different mindset from one that you might have from the corporate world or from even the academic world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting what you say about theater school. And, because I've had a lot of discussion with first act actors, right? People who have been in the careers of whimsy since they were 4, right? And it's interesting to hear about people's experiences in theater school wherever they are in the world, and how completely different their opinions are. But what underlies everyone is like this feeling of like I could see it in your face, right? Like rage, honestly, when you are studying the greats, performing the greats with like-minded people, and then you get thrown into the real world and you're auditioning for a Taco Bell commercial, and you're like, I want to go back into that world. And it's hard because I live in an academic world as well, too. The ivory tower of academia. It's a fake world. It's a fantasy world. When you get thrust into the real world, you're like, it's all paperwork and patient complaints. So I don't really have a question, but it's just there's so much of the education piece that when you get into the real world, you're like, it's so disappointing.
Yeah.
So how do you, such a loaded question, keep going and build the career that you have, especially, and we'll touch on this so much more, please, in the Mocap physical theater world that you live in?
Well, I'd come from being a professional dancer, from having trained to be a dancer. So there was a correlation saying that if you do the training, you get access to the world, right? If you're good enough, right? And I'd already had that experience. So now drama school was also qualified by the fact that this is also the time when my mum got very sick and died. So she died in 1997. And so in many ways, I wasn't as present at drama school than maybe some of the others were. So at least those next 2 years. And I was on a scholarship there as well, incidentally. I want to point that out because anybody going to drama school now who doesn't have a scholarship, you're facing walking out with a massive debt, which I would say, well, that's a mixed blessing. You may get the training, you may get the launching pad that will help you pay off that debt quickly, but there's no guarantees of that. And it's the same thing whether you're going to university or college now as well, right? So, and because acting is so unpredictable and it may take more time than you expect, financing those first few years in some ways I think is more important, because, and this happened in the UK as well, was that there was a complaint that with the reduction in state scholarships, it meant that only those with parents who could afford to pay for their children to live in a major city and be relatively unemployed for 2 to 3 years, only those people ended up becoming professional actors. And that's wrong, right? And that goes against with everything that I believe. So that sense of disappointment can be tied with the need to earn money, which I didn't have, right? So that's why I feel incredibly lucky for that. If I had left and I had £40,000 of debt to deal with, then every those 2-3 years where I may or may not have got a job would have been so much harder, you know. So far as the collegiate the feeling of being in part of a family and then not, I think that was a wrong assumption on my side. There are many things that I've learned over the years that I thought or assumed were true, and I'm sure if I spoke to any of the teachers, they probably would have told me that what I know now. But when you're young, there's a podcast I heard recently with Schitt's Creek, Kathy O'Hara, and she was saying when she was doing like second act stuff, she missed being in a room with equally deluded people. and again, I feel lucky to have had that opportunity, because when I left, I had no idea quite how much I was a small fish in a massive pond. Whereas now, that's very obvious very quickly, and that can be disheartening. So I honestly feel that I was lucky to have graduated in the time I did. Yes, I was disappointed, but it was probably more a result of naivety than anything to do with the industry. The industry is just the industry. And I had a period where I could be deluded enough to think that I could make a go of it. And so, and not with massive debt. So I don't feel like I had the journey that maybe some others had, racking up debt, going to a theatre school in Montreal and coming out and having to make something in those early years, and to prove that their money investment was worth it and somehow pay off the debt. That's a lot of pressure, man.
And it's a lot of pressure on art, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think I really like what you said about how for 99.9% of, I think, careers, doing the education gives you access to the world.
Yeah.
Like, that's such an interesting way to think about things, where acting does not. No. And like, if you have financial debt, financial insecurity, stuff like that, and you don't have access to the world that you want to be in, like, you're I don't even know how it's possible. And it's funny, like, about delusion, and I wonder why. Like, that's probably why, and this is getting philosophical, why most university students are in their like early 20s, when you can be delusional about the world.
Yeah.
Cause like, I always joke, like, if I had to go back to medical school, if I woke up tomorrow and said, "Oh, welcome to day one med school," I'd be like, "No, are you kidding me? That's insane. What a scam." But probably the same with most other careers. Like, it's just a weird, but I think adding on is that acting is so, I don't know, I was about to say so scammy, but like, because we all feel so restricted, and we're just outside looking in, and we're like, what is the password to get in? Can I pay money? What can I do? Yeah. Like, here's somebody telling me I know the password if you give me this money, but it's not true. Like, no other industry is as scammy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that scamminess is actually industry, in the sense that, one, increasingly, as soon as drama schools become universities, that means that they have to do certain things in order to get the money from the government, right? That means that the students have to deliver a paper at the end of their term. It also means that it's a business. You need to get the actors who are going to become famous in order to advertise the value of your course, right? And that means that your drama school is only validated by the industry success, the visible industry successes at that, of your students. So that will create a selection bias as well. But that's the same in any other university that's pumping out workers for the industry that it believes exists. Mm-hmm. The challenge with acting is that, A, the profession has been around since before universities, and universities have been around for a long time, right? And I believe that if you can separate your sense of being an actor away from the industry. So you start off with saying, I am an actor. Then you say, well, what do I do in order to be an actor? Well, I act. Somebody else said that we always need permission to act. I'm going to push back on that and say, you don't need permission at all. A jazz player if they want to be good at jazz, if you heard going in the woodshed, there's this phrase saying working in the woodshed, right? Where the idea would be that suddenly a jazz player would come out and they'd be like, oh my God, they've excelled so much in their ability and skill. And that's where the idea of selling your soul at the crossroad came from as well. But all that happened is they'd done work in the woodshed. They'd gone down to the woodshed and practiced, did things out of view. Now, this is very rare these days, where apparently you have to show everything. but my recommendation is act even when even when the industry doesn't seem to need you or want you. If you like doing speeches and you like doing scenes and you like acting, then find ways to do it. And it doesn't mean that you have to pay to do scene work. You can work on a speech. You can film it. You don't need to show it to anybody. You can do things and try out characters that otherwise that you would never do or might even be socially uncomfortable to do out in the real world, but you get to play. That's your job as an artist. And just because it's not a physical medium that ends up with a product, that it's a service in effect, that doesn't mean that if you're not working in and being paid for it, that you don't have value. You build your value and make sure you're available to the industry. And then the industry can benefit from what you're doing. It's that way around. Mm. The industry gets to benefit from you as an artist, not the other way around. And if you have that attitude, that means when you do a casting, you're doing it for yourself because it's a scene that you can work on. It's a scene that you can learn from. It's a scene that gives you the opportunity to get a reader. And I know it's a ball ache, but it's another opportunity to try new techniques, to work on old ones, to discover something new. And that means that when you do the casting, you have a sense of play that you can, that is enshrined, because you can only play when you feel safe. You can only play when the stakes aren't that high, right? You can't force somebody to be happy. You can't really force anybody to play either. So you can't force yourself, right? So, and that play, that's the spark that comes across through the screen. Now, it doesn't occur because there's somebody going to employ you. It occurred because you're an actor, and as an actor, you practice and you have a vocation, and that means that you are not defined by what the other person thinks on the other side of the screen. Your value is not defined by that. Your value is defined by what you do every day that pushes the needle just a little bit more to improve your craft, to improve your ability to tell stories well in a fully embodied way, that makes people feel things, that does what Judi Dench did.
Oh, that's so, so, so powerful. Like my hair just stands on end. I love that. And I think so is it the high stakes that makes us forget to play? Is that what it does? As I think about myself, and I'm going to be a little self-centered here when I'm hearing you talk about that, and I'm thinking about what I've really tried to work on this year is trying to find the fun in this dumpster fire industry. And I was like, what is the shift? I don't really know, but what is it that causes actors to lose that fun when there are so many other jobs they could do in the world that aren't as ridiculous as acting? This is supposed to be fun. Why do we lose that?
So I've had different approaches to acting over the years. And one of my least favorite is that I was like a crack addict, that I would be okay with, methadone and very average drugs. They don't give me quite the high, but every now and again, I get the really good stuff. And that keeps me going through all the, again, not a healthy approach. I mean, don't do crack, guys. But that sort of, I endure all this horribleness in order for the chance that me, the work, and the industry all align, that puts me in a state of joyful flow and being paid for it. That's like the ideal, right? But that means that everything else is not that. But most of acting and being an actor is that not that stuff, right? So that means you've got to go, well, okay, so if most of the destruction of joy is the desire to please the person or to do what it is you think will get you the job, and those motives are not acting motives. Those are personal motives that are based on insecurity as a human being, which is completely valid. I just want to point out it's fine. But it doesn't help you do the scene. You can park that and save that for, 11 o'clock at night when you're, when you're going to bed thinking, oh, I did, all the bad thoughts coming. Just save it for that. Leave it for that moment. But when you're doing the scene, that's not the place for those thoughts. The scene in the self-tape is more about you playing than it is about the production or the casting director. Or the award ceremonies, or whatever the hell it is in the future. None of that matters. It's not. What matters is that you give yourself the opportunity to play. Now, the question is, how do you do that? Because you get, a script that you have to learn, high turnaround. You've got responsibilities you have to cancel or wrangle. Then you've got to get a reader. And I heard somebody else say that. And yeah, often, you get a casting and there's a side who goes, yay. And then the other side goes, oh, shit. Here we go again. And so creating a process that you can recall has worked, that's important, because every time feels like the first time you've ever got to do it. And you sort of think, I'm never going to do this in time. But you probably, the more that you do it and the more that you have, you can recall, well, I know that I end up delivering something which is not just good, but good enough. That's one thing. And that there is a process that if I go through will get me there. Now, I talk about bandwidth a lot when I'm teaching, and the more you can do to make things automatic and instinctual, the more opportunity there is to play. There's one of my favorite movies is The Hustler, and there's a Paul Newman speech that I learned because I love it so much, where he says, and he's talking about basically a state of flow while he's playing pool, and he likens it to being, on the back of a horse. And he says, it's great. It's really great when you're right and you're right. You've got everything working for you, timing, touch. That's the state of flow. Now, you have to work for that. You have to accept you're eating a shit sandwich and you have to choose a shit sandwich. And so you kind of go, okay, the sandwich bit is the scene. What do I have to do to get to the point where I can be in a state of flow and play? Now, for me, that means 1, learning the lines backwards and forwards and sideways. Then 2, understanding and learning how to get into the skin, the psychology and physicality of the character as quickly as possible for the casting, not for the actual thing, but it's a good practice that you treat castings differently. At least in the speed and efficacy, right? You've got to get something that's out there that's good enough. Once I know the lines backwards and forwards, and this is obviously something that you can develop over time, and I've got an understanding of the character, the physicality, the psychology, I then rehearse. I might do it with my own recordings. I might find somebody else. But I rehearse not answering necessarily all the questions. That's the other thing that ruins fun, is that if you go in and say, well, I did it this way yesterday, and these are the decisions that I made. Well, yeah, that's one way of doing it. It's secure, but there's no real fun in that, right? Whereas if you set up a situation where, just like Paul Newman, you can say, whatever you do is right and you know it's right, that means that you are entering into the scene not knowing quite how you're going to do it. You know the basic rules, you know the basic character, you know what they wouldn't do, and these are all baked in, and the words is just the stuff that bubbles on top. And then it just comes out, and you can reset, and you can do a different version where you play again and you see what happens. And I think that self-tapes have kind of pushed people towards needing to be really, really certain and fixed about what it is that they are delivering in a casting, because that's the form, right? And you have more and more control because you can do 20 takes and you can pick the right one. But what that does, it removes the sense of play. When back in the days when you had in-person meetings, you got to do the scene maybe 2 or 3 times, and you got to talk to somebody else to try something else. and they would select the best shot. And that meant that if you were in a good place and you played, it was enjoyable. You had they would select the one that worked best for their purposes, and they had enjoyed the session as well. Great, everybody wins. Self tapes, sending it off to the ether and 100 people. It's just actors have to fight for their autonomy of their artistry and their autonomy of value. And I think that's more necessary now than it was, because you used to be validated by in-person meetings with casting directors. Now you've only got you, your cat, your dog, or an empty house. I don't know, and so you have to really, really fight really hard to protect your vocation, to protect your sense of value as a human first and as an artist second.
So it's so powerful. And I would love to dive more into the second part that you said. After you've memorized the lines, we all know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then you said getting into the skin of the character, because I think that is like what makes you, Pascal, unique as an actor, acting coach, and like just everything that you do because of your embodied movement, Laban, your Mocap. Please tell me more about that.
All right. Well, okay. So first of all, learning lines, there's lots of ways of doing it. But personally, what I do is I record all the lines, both sides, and I record them in a monotone and then play them back again, and again, whatever I'm doing. The reason I do it in a monotone is that it's close to the Meisner idea, that I don't want to prejudge or predecide how something should be said. I'm also recording all the lines because they're all important, not just my lines. When you read a script, when you first look at, now, where am I?
Highlight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you're already making decisions before you've even got to the end of the script. So that's one thing. Now, so what happened with it, Mocap and embodied acting, to me, are aligned because Mocap forced me to look at the degree to which I was changing into other people. So there are different philosophies of what acting is. For some people, it's different versions of yourself, which is often described as inside out, right? So drawing on your own personal experiences, if I was this person, what would I do? I think it's that way around. So that's sort of the more traditional method sort of approach. However, to me, that was very mental. It's good for film, actioning, verbs, answering the 10 questions. It's all good stuff, but it keeps you in your head. And one of the problems that I had after RADA was that when I was in the Mocap studio, I could see it was still me. And I was so annoyed by that. I thought I was doing a really good job of becoming somebody else, but I wasn't. The way I walked, the way I sat down, the way I turned my head, all this was me. And if you took away the script and showed somebody else, they go, yeah, that's Pascal. And it really bugged me. Because I believe, my side of my belief behind acting is that acting is a process of transformation, is that you transform yourself as close as you can without going insane, as close as you can to become somebody else. And I base that on the idea that our behavior, a lot of our behavior, not all of it, some of it's genetic, but a lot of it is a construct of our experiences, of our relationships, of family, of our culture, of all those things. And so therefore, if you're playing somebody else, you can do that instead. Why not? You're just doing what you do for yourself, but now as somebody else. That means that after Heavy Rain, I started going back to Laban, which, if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's a system of analyzing and categorizing qualities of movement. I suppose that's the best way of describing it. But what it really means is that as an actor, you can use this process to explore different physicalities and tempos and behaviors that are foreign from your own. You've got your own habitual way of moving. You've got your own habitual way of gesturing. You've got a physical heritage that is yours. And Laban helps you get away from and increase the range away from your own natural physicality. So if you listen to the way that I speak, and you'll notice that there's a certain rhythm attached to it. But if I was to speak like this, you would have a very different idea, because actually I'm using a Laban idea of actually extending the flow, extending time. See, I just tripped up because it's using my bandwidth, right? Because it's not me. But that means that you can change yourself physically and vocally using these different qualities to expand your range as an actor, to expand the possibility of physical and vocal transformation. Now that leaves the question, well, what about psychological transformation? Well, after Heavy Rain, about that time, I hit the library. I lived near the British Library at the time, so I went and I studied everything I could from like the 1600s right up to present day studies about nonverbal behavior, behavioral studies. I needed to know how humans were motivated and how that affected how they behaved. Basically, that was my key thing. And I came across something which was in the academic field, which was called approach avoid, which is the idea that you have, well, I'll describe, it's worth describing the exercise, right? So the study involved bringing subjects in, and they put the subject's arms in a cradle horizontally, and then they flashed up words on a screen in front of them. And the instruction was, if it's a word that makes you feel drawn to it, right, that you want to approach, then you move your hand forward. And if it's something you want to avoid, you move your hand back. And so they would record the responses and flash up all sorts of words, all random words. And everybody did it. And then they said, well, okay, let's find out where it's coming from in the brain. So they did the opposite. They said, well, okay, do the opposite of what your urge is. And they timed the difference. By doing that, they established this was an old brain response, which makes sense. It's an approach-avoid response that is going on all the time to help you stay alive, right? It's the thing in your brain that makes you react to the cyclist, which is going down the wrong way in the cycle lane in Toronto, that you barely catch out the corner of your eye and you move like a cat jumping off of tin foil, right? That's the limbic system saving you. There's a lot of problems with that as well as human being these creatures with this old brain that has this response, right? Particularly if it's stuck on. But anyway, that old limbic response is responsible for keeping you alive, and it's the approach avoidance. Every living creature has that response, right? It's so old in our genes that it goes back to even before we were human. Even amoebas have an approach avoid mechanism. So then after that, I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I started looking at, well, what else is, because that's psychological and physical, right? This is the blend. It is, you see a word and precognitively you respond to it, and it's a physical response. So it's psychophysical. That's the root of it. And so then I discovered other ways that I could establish the psychophysical relationships of the character. Because we've all got those same psychophysical relationships. It is, okay, yeah, they're approach avoid, but there's other ways of manifesting these relationships. And to me, that's like a map. And if I have a map, then the character has a map. And all I need to do is create the character's map. And that is a window into their pre-conscious motivations to do anything. If the words are the stuff that bubbles on top, then you've got to ask, well, why am I saying the words? If you ask it cognitively and say, because I want to educate, because I want to illuminate, right? Those might be the actions that I would choose to describe our interaction now. But actually there's a psychophysical relationship, which is more, it's difficult to describe because it's psycho and physical, and I'd have to show it rather than say it. But it involves the relationship that I have with you, where you are now psychophysically and where I would like you to be. And my words are simply the thing which are trying to make that happen. A good example would be, so say, for instance, you really find somebody attractive. Well, where you want them to be is close to you, right? That's actually what you would like, it to be close to you. And that person is on the other side of the table talking to a friend, and they're not interested in you. Now, the psychophysical relationship is you want them to be next to you. You want them to be close to you. You want them to have their focus on you, but that's not happening. So your motivation is to correct that sense of conflict. And it's a psychophysical thing. It's pre-linguistic. but the words and your behavior all comes out from that. And your relationship to that conflict. Now, it's a very different way of working to the method. And for a while, I thought I was entirely insane. I tested this out with RADA alumni at first, my friends, the friends that I had at drama school. Then I expanded that out to other actors. This is all in London. Then I started teaching at the Actors Centre because it worked. It actually worked, and I kept on thinking, sure, maybe this is confirmation bias. Maybe it's just because people want it to work. But it worked again and again. But then I moved country and I kind of put it on the back burner. Then COVID hits and we're all locked down. And there was all these students that I teach for the Mocap vaults. There's about 1,000 of them that just needed things to do, right? Needed to continue the learning. And so I was reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And there was a section in there about the Pesso-Boyden psychomotor technique, which is a psychophysical form of therapy. And it is founded on exactly the same principle that I had stumbled on 15 years ago. I saw this, I thought, it's validated by Stanford tests. They put people into MRI scans to see the change in their brain after they'd done this therapy, and it worked. And so I ended up doing a course in PBSP, although I'm not a therapist, to kind of find out more about it. And it was, this is the same principles, the very same principles that have been validated in Stanford is the same foundational principle about what I use for acting. So I started teaching it again, and again, it worked, and it worked, and it worked, and it keeps on working. And it helps many actors to get out of their head and to play. That's the thing. If you set up the map, if you set up the scaffold on which or the map or the scaffold on which your actor, if you set up the map and the scaffold of your character's life and say, these are the relationships, these are the rules, and you know the lines backwards and forwards, you can press play and you just go. And it's an amazing feeling because then you're in flow. And this is, again, it works. I'm so surprised continually, and yet it works and it works and it works. And I used it professionally way before, so I've tested it. I've road tested it, and I can actually see the difference in my acting. The first time I used it was in Spooks or MI5 in the UK, and I've got an old show reel of it, and I can see that the quality of my acting, the presence of being the character in the moment, suddenly goes whoop. Suddenly, it's an exponential improvement. And that was just the beginning. It's also very useful in the Mocap volume because if you are working from the character's world, if you like, their global arena, their psychophysical reality, it affects, and you use Laban as well, you can completely transform your physicality to somebody or something else. And it's all right. And it's right. It's that feeling of flow. The reason why Mocap is important in that story is that in film and TV, the director decides what the audience is going to look at. The size of the shot is often, you start with wide and, you do establishing things. So a lot of the actors won't know what they're really doing in the wide anyway. So you come in and then you come in further and you're over the shoulder, the standard approach. That's visual storytelling. It's a visual medium. Mocap is a physical medium. The player could be looking at you from any direction. The way that you're sitting from one angle may say one thing, but if the player is looking at you from another angle, it may say another thing. So if you are carrying something and it doesn't register in your body, your skeleton, that you are carrying a weight, Mocap will find it out. Mocap strips you back down to your very, very essentials, down to your skeleton. And any bullshit or any failure to fully inhabit the reality of another being is revealed. And in many ways, I sometimes think that drama schools now would do better to be predicated on a foundation of Mocap rather than of theatre or of film. Because if you can transform, and if you can do quick work, and if you can turn yourself into other people, and Mocap believes you, you can do that in any medium whatsoever. It's the one that is like the my drama school teacher used to sit there and say, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Right? And mocap is like the equivalent of the bullshit detector acting coach that says, I don't believe you.
So do you have any advice then? Because I always get asked, like advice for doing video games and mocap, right? I mean, I have no experience with it, but I've done significant auditions in this and taken some of your incredible classes, and it's just the most fun. And I know I'm probably already answering the question, and the answer is do classes. But like, do you have any advice for actors who are interested in not just mocap and performance for video games, but getting more physical?
Yeah. Yes. So I said earlier about bandwidth. If you are physically habituated only to your own physical heritage, if you are used to only moving roughly the way that you do, if you're used to gesturing only pretty much the way that you do, nodding when you do, see? Yes, she nods. If you're only used to that, then that will be the range that is available to you in comfort. Right? You'll have bandwidth to say the lines, to do many things, because you're being close to yourself. So the advice to anybody that wants to be more embodied and have a greater range to transform into other people, it would say, increase the range of your physical ability to express. Now, how do you do that? Well, there are two things, proprioception and kinesthesia. So one is the sense of your movement in space, kinesthesia. The other is your sense of position. Now, there's technical words basically for the knowledge of your movement and your body in space. The more that you do to train that side of you, the more you'll be free and you'll have more bandwidth to play if you're playing something far from yourself. How? Laban is my number one go-to, again and again and again, or Laban. It's better known in Europe than it is in North America. North America has been dominated by the film industry and doesn't have the theatre heritage that made Laban possible, if that makes sense. And for film, film is a different medium. For embodied acting, Laban would be my number one go-to. Learn that. Find a way of learning that. Of course, yes, I have a video course, but I'm not selling it here. I'm saying wherever you get it from. And I would also say, don't start off by looking at the categories and then trying to do what the word makes you think is required. Go from the physical qualities first. So if something is strong and direct, you move in a strong way. You try and figure out what that is, but you're not saying, I'm going to move in a strong way. You look at what is the quality of strong. Well, it's the feeling of being an unstoppable force against an immovable object with the capacity to, I'm strong enough to move through liquid concrete. I'm surrounded by liquid concrete, but I have the strength to move through it, right? I am mass. I am a singular mass, like a black hole. You use all these ways to try and get your body to do it, and then you experience it. And now you know what strong is. But if you start with strong, you'll do an impression of strong, and that won't get it into your body. So whoever you learn with or however you do it, keep away from thinking that if you know the words, you understand the quality of the movement. It's actually the other way around. Understand physically the quality of the movement, and then you have a tag which describes that quality. And it's a tag. It's not the movement itself. So that's Laban. Then I'd say anything physical. So I'd go to anything from yoga or karate or, I don't know, running, whatever it is that's physical. The challenge with that is that these are all forms that tell you to move in a certain way and make certain shapes. This is why a lot of dancers have trouble playing ugly characters, physically ugly characters. It's because they are trained to such a degree to be aesthetically pleasing. Even if they are aesthetically ugly, it's still aesthetic. Right? So even in modern dance, when you're hitting, quotes, ugly positions, they're still aesthetically balanced, right? As opposed to real human physical ugliness, should we say. The same with weight as well. Dancers have a lot of problem with being physically grounded on the floor, because they're often, not all of them, but often they're sort of, encouraged to be light. So there is a danger with only doing sort of movement forms that you become restricted, which is why I always come back to Laban again and again and again, because to me, that really expands the range of your potential physical behavior to make it comfortable. And you will always find areas where you don't, there are always qualities of movement that you find difficult. Like for me, as I did earlier, I did sort of something called sustained and direct. Right? Just two. And if I add the third as well, that does something else. But I know that I've been in mocap volumes where I've been asked to play a different character, and there's one occasion where Gilles Montet, who's a movement director from Montpellier, Ubisoft, and he asked me to play this character for one of the mission givers for Far Cry 6. And I had to do this really slow, I say in quotes slow, this is how it felt, look from left to right. That's all it was. And it was like torture, absolute torture, just to do that and be present. Because it's not my way. You can hear by the way I talk, I'm not that. So you will find your area of weakness, and that allows you to, again, expand into that, work into that. Then you can apply those to characters. You can apply it to speeches. You do your work in the woodshed. That's where you do the work, so that it's available to you when you have a casting. Other than that, movement-wise, Feldenkrais is quite good. Alexander teaches you how to leave yourself alone, which is quite good, and to not maintain and hold on to habitual areas of tension. That's very good as well, because in the mocap volume, if you have any tension, it registers in the skeleton instantly. It sort of it shows up real quick, and if that's your area of tension, because that's your habitual physical heritage, then it will show up. And if that's not the characters, it shouldn't be there. So anything that improves your proprioception and your kinesthesia, and does that in a way that frees you to have a wider range of physical possibility, that's what you should be doing.
Do you have any favorite moments from your time on set, in the volume, in the booth?
Yes. They come very quickly to mind. So I did it. Some of them I can't talk about in any detail because they're under NDA. But I can talk in general terms. So, Far Cry 6, COVID lockdown, a lot of the actors that were based in the US could not come and do the mocap. So I was employed to because I'd already done, well, they knew me. So they invited me to come and be the body for one of the actors, that I can't say who it is. But that required me to be physically very different from me. Also have an accent as well. They weren't going to use my voice, but physically, gesturally, the way I stand up, sit down, the way I walk, the whole lot. And that's really difficult. I seem to be only attracted to things that are really difficult, basically. But I did it, and now I look back and I see that mocap, and it's not me. I look at it and I can see that you can't see me. And this is such a joy. It's a terrible business model. It's a terrible, terrible business model. I can't ever show that to anyone. And even if I did, they'd be like, "Well, yeah, but who are you? What brand are you?"
That's the win.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was also on Watch Dogs. I was the movement director, so I helped them build a behavior library to help the players any one game mechanic. So you could basically pick anyone in London at all to recruit them, and so they all had to have physicalities that matched them. And so you had to create a library that could be mixed and matched to make sure that everybody was different. So I did that. I did mocap on that as well. And I did quite a lot on that game. I actually have like 4 or 5 credits on that, but you're only allowed 2. So
the stupidest thing.
I'm really proud of that. And also I did Bagley as well. So that was just voice. but I did the scratch and then had to re-audition because the scratch is not the final. Scratch is when you do the script or the first pass of the script, so the animators can time things and they can figure out the first pass. And everybody said after they heard what I did, they were like, they can't imagine anybody else doing it. So do it. So I ended up, and that was a good feeling, great feeling. So Bagley, and that was years of work. In total, it was about 4 years, I think, of consistently going in and doing voice. In a game that I was also mocapping and doing the movement direction for. So that was like, that was a gift, a real gift. Then recently I did I have to be careful about this. I call it complex body doubling. I did another one for a character that, I have to be careful here, thinking really hard. A character that was voiced by somebody else, fine. But that is already known. And I had to be the physical version of that character. And it was radically different from me. I go in and I do it without a problem. It's great. It's fun. It's flow. We're all playing and I'm improvising on the spot in the mocap volume as somebody very different from me. And then we did some library stuff as well. And because I know the library, we did it in half a day instead of a day, and just when you do that and you just feel like you're at the top of your game, it's great. It's really great. That's not the majority of my life. So when that happens, it's like, wow, that's luck. That's just, you really, and I think your what's his name? Antonio Salvatore?
Antonio, yeah.
Antonio, the other way around.
Scar, yeah.
So he said the same thing, is that more and more when he does get the opportunity to actually do the thing, you really appreciate it. I used to take it for granted, and then COVID, and then Ubisoft wasn't doing anything. And obviously I made a terrible mistake basing the majority of my income on one company. But that means that any time that I do mocap now, I'm like, this could be taken away. I may never do this again. Who knows? This is such a gift. It really is.
Is there anything that you are looking forward to coming up?
Yes. So, so a couple of things. One is the release of that thing that I just did. Also, Bagley interactive audiobook has just been released as well. Which is really cool. It's Pick Your Own Adventure on Audible. I did it in here. So cool. So next year I'll be doing more Mocap Vaults classes and expanding what's available to include close quarter battle and maybe even cleaning up your own data as well. So that might be the next step. It looks like I will be taking on a greater role within Mocap Vaults so far as community engagement is concerned. At least I hope so. And I'm also going to set up an atelier, which is, basically I've got teachers in Denver and LA that teach the GAP technique, the global arena psychophysical technique. But in Toronto, I don't think that that's the same thing. It's not like I throw a stone in Toronto and I hit an actor. And there's not that feeling of intense competition that I need to know the newest thing to get the edge. There's none of that. So the atelier is the idea that I'm collecting a group of actors who I can train with the technique that will explore how we use the technique to create work. Then we'll have a show and tell, and it'll be pay what you want. And then my idea is that if this works, I believe it will, then we'll be creating truly compelling performances that will be the foundation for a company. Because in the olden days, years and years ago, you could build a company around an idea. You could build a company around an idea of a new approach to theatre. And you would start off with that as the reason for being, rather than perhaps I have a script, or I have a cause, or I have a particular angle that I believe the world needs to know, and starting with that and getting the funding and the support and then doing it that way and then creating the work. That's a different reason for being. The atelier is going to be about craft, vocation, the actor as being an actor primarily, regardless of what the industry thinks, that it's live, particularly now as AI does increasingly do some of the more generic lifting. But I think live will also have more and more currency in the coming years as well. The unpredictable, and if you're playing, it's unpredictable. And so I want to create this. Yeah, so this is the journey of next year will be expanding my teaching and the atelier. And I'm looking forward to that because again, it's impossible. It makes me really uncomfortable, and I'm scared, and so I'm going to do it.
I love it. Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
Yes. So, quite simply, choose your shit sandwich. I know I said that before, but know that you're choosing it, right? So if you're going to be an actor, you're choosing a certain kind of shit sandwich. If you're choosing to be a medic, you're choosing a certain kind of shit sandwich. Every sandwich has some kind of really annoying, shitty aspect to it. It could be the accounts, it could be the things that all that stuff. It could be the constant cycle of being judged. But you're choosing it. As soon as you said, I am making this choice, then you can work to reduce the effect of that unpleasantness as much as you can and appreciate the sandwich. If you're saying, I am basing what I'm doing in the expectation that I will be rewarded at some point in the hopefully near future by not needing to look for work, by being involved only in projects that I truly believe in that are changing the world. Do you know what I mean? That's crazy. And yet in the background of, and this has been in the background of my mind for years, that's when I get to that point, I'll be happy. Terrible idea. Understand that it's process and choosing the discomfort and knowing that it's worth what you're doing. If you align yourself with the value, so my value is to teach, is to help people feel, to help actors act better, to help audiences go to the theatre with trust that they are going to be astonished. That's my value. That's the value that I live by. So I try to make things that align with that value, and I understand a lot that comes with a lot of nonsense. A lot of hard work in accounting, in spreadsheets, in emails, I don't know, on and on and on the list goes. But I'm doing it for a reason. That's why I say it's why I say it's my secular religion. And if you do that, you are working a vocation. Then your only job is to create a financial foundation that can support you as an actor. And whatever you need to do that, wherever you need to work, whatever you need to do, get to that point as quickly as you can. Don't work on the premise that in year 10, I'm going to be a regular on a series and then I can pay off my debt. You are an artist for 80 years with any luck. So have an 80-year plan. It's crazy, but you're an artist for all your life. Even if you don't work for 5 years, you're still an artist.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Pascal, for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for being just a fellow kindred nerd. My brain was on fire the entire time listening to you talk about character embodiment. My brain was all tingly. I absolutely love it. If you are interested in working with Pascal, and you should, I will put some links in the show notes below. He's the main instructor for Mocap Vaults Canada. He also teaches Laban and embodied movement. He also has one of the coolest courses I've ever taken. I'll put, again, link in the show notes below on how to listen in character. Because if you've ever watched, a film or a TV show, they don't concentrate as much on the person who's talking. They flip to the person who's listening to the person talking, because listening is so fascinating to watch. Yes? So he can teach you how to listen in character and be that fascinating person to watch. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you will join me next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye!